Hey, how's it going, everybody? I'm Ben from Universal Audio, and welcome back to another Luna Office Hours. If this is the first one you're joining in, welcome. We are currently all working from our home studios, and as you hopefully have heard, either through email or on social media, we have released Luna Recording System. Which is a fantastic audio and music creation system that's powered by Apollo and just gives us amazing, very low latency audio recording and production environment. So as part of our, we're posting tutorials, we're posting sound examples, we're trying to get you guys as much information and as many tips and help in getting started with Luna as possible. But beyond that, we wanted to be here live with you guys to answer questions and give you tips and tricks, because there's too much to cover in just a few little videos. So what we figured we'd do is do a whole bunch of these office hour engagements where it's not just me, but I also have a whole crew along with me, dialing in from all over the country, actually all over the world. And we are here to help you guys out. We're going to be answering, in this session, we're going to specifically focus on answering a bunch of questions that we've been seeing come up in the chat, things that we've been hearing on the forums, and really just trying to address as many of your guys' questions as we possibly can. So now I've got you guys all on the screen. Want to say hi?
What's going on?
How's everybody doing?
Nice. So we're all kind of watching the chat, all trying to kind of keep up with what's going on over there, but we'll also kind of take turns showing you guys how to do different things inside of Luna. So I think a good place to start, I saw a question, I think it was from like the end of our last session, and Matt, I think you found this one, was people are asking about pre or post fader metering, and also about the inserts pre and post fader. Do you want to show people how to kind of tweak those settings and what the skinny is on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Luna can do either pre-fader or post-fader metering. Let me share my screen with you here, and I'll show you how to do that. Cool. So when you're in Luna, basically in the settings panel, there's a lot of settings like this that can be adjusted. Go to the settings panel here on the Luna dashboard. Sorry, Luna sidebar. Then go to the options panel, and then the display menu up here has a metering option. So by default, it's set to pre-fader. You can also set it to post-fader if that's the way you like to work. But yeah, that's how you switch all the metering in Luna.
So let's do a show of hands. Who here is a pre-fader type of person?
Always.
Yep.
Post-fader boys? Yep, exactly.
Maybe.
Is that a split? What should we do? Like, who's a mostly mixing guy versus...
Right, and that's basically, we dove right into a technical thing here, but yeah, what's the purpose of having the two different metering modes? You kind of nailed it, Tom. It's like when you're mixing, like you want to know post fader, you want to know like what your level is going into After Effects and going into feeding into your buses, whereas when you're tracking, the number one thing you care about is what's your level going like to tape, right?
Yeah, big time. It's a huge thing. There's a cool thing with the Apollo, and maybe Connor can confirm on this as well, that the hardware metering on the front of the Apollo obviously remains. It's not following kind of like anything to do with Luna in that sense. So really, if you're tracking, you can observe like input levels to Luna through like from the Unison preamp there, right? But if you're adding level in effects and record effects, the only way to check that is pre-fader metering inside Luna. Is that right? Or
yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, the Apollo still shows the input meter, and the Luna channel will show you the signal level based on your chosen preference.
Yeah, so like I suppose to explain it, if you were in post fader and you pulled your fader down 10 dB, you wouldn't actually realize that you may well be overloading during recording, right?
Yeah, that's definitely the split is like, yeah, you should totally pre-fader meter when you're tracking because you don't want to clip, and then post-fader meter when you're mixing because you want to understand signal flow and gain staging. Seems
yeah. But then throws up another interesting question. Sorry, Ben. Because all the UA processing is running in like floating point, right? Effectively. Does that mean we can be more free from worrying about that in Luna in some senses? Like as long as you don't clip the physical input meter on your Apollo when you're recording, so you're not clipping the converter, we actually more free to sort of just create really?
Yeah, within Luna and within the mix busing inside of Luna, until you go back out to any physical output, you're a 32-bit floating point mixer, and clipping in that sense is not a thing in the same sense it is with a converter. So you can certainly reach 0 dBFS, but the artifacts are different. And the real thing to think about is analog emulations, like U82 plugins are going to be more susceptible to the high signal input than plugins that don't have full spectrum. It's like sort of end-to-end modeling of an analog signal. So you still want to be careful of that. It's not to say that you don't have to worry depending on what you're doing, but you're certainly not going to notice digital artifacts in a 32-bit float scenario when you're overloading the input to a bus, for instance. Just depends on the plugins on that bus.
Well, hey, can I try and convince you guys? Maybe can I sell you on it? Because here's the thing. Here's the way I've always looked at it. Because pre-fader metering is pre-fader but post inserts. So the meter is telling you what your processing is doing, and the way I've always looked at it is the physical position of the fader indicates the level at which it's contributing to whatever buses or mixes. So to me, pre-fader metering is kind of the best of both worlds. It's post inserts but pre-fader metering, and then the physical fader shows me how it's contributing to subsequent buses. That's always the way I've looked at it.
Interesting.
But anyway,
cool.
Probably not going to convince anybody, but I just throw it out there.
No, it's a good vibe. I actually do switch to pre-fader when I know I'm tracking. Basically, that's for this reason. Yeah.
So I just want to touch on 2 points there. One is about gain staging and like how A, important it is, but B, with UAD stuff, and this has been part of what I love about have worked in console and with Unison and UAD record effects, is like the gain staging of them is so true to life. Like the amount when you are cranking 50 dB of gain on the SSL channel strip in your Unison slot, it's acting exactly like the real thing does. But then if you feed that into, say, a 1176, you're getting that same amount of gain stage blend that you would get in the real physical world as well. So you can bring that, you can drive into that as hard as you want to, and this is, I think, what you were talking about, right, Connor, with the 32-bit float. When you're coming out of the SSL on the Unison side, you could, in theory, go beyond 0 dBFS, even though, and that's bringing it into the 1176, which is then be like, cool, like you're driving me super hard, but I see what you're trying to do here, and then you can attenuate the output of that. But what does matter is where at the end of the record effects, if you clip, say you left the 1176 kind of cranked and you were digitally clipping on what you printed into the file on the track, if that's clipped, there's no going back from that, correct?
Right. Yeah. And yeah, you pointed out something that's truly incredible about Unison plugins is they're like this magic wand for input clipping because of the way that they're structured in the signal flow of Apollo. Put Unison on everything. It's like it truly is a lifesaver when it comes to accidental overloads and catching signal peaks. But yeah, definitely want to treat record effects like gear, like before you're going to tape, because that's in effect what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's glad we cleared that up. And then this is the easy one. Inserts are all pre-fader, correct?
Yes. Yep. All inserts in Luna are pre-fader on all track types.
Yeah. Easy one. Great. And so I know we promised the folks to show them kind of a vocal comping workflow at the end of our last session. Drew, did you pull up a session with some versions that we could comp? Or?
No, I have the ARM aux session queued up. Yeah.
Cool. Do you mind? Let's jump over to that, and then Matt, do you mind pulling up a session in the wings here, just so we can show some vocal comping after Drew does the aux arm?
Yeah. Let me see what I got here.
Great.
Okay. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And so yeah, this is something I've been seeing a lot online. And there's, just want to talk a little bit about how the auxes are handled and how how they relate to ARM. You know, some of you that are running Luna, you might notice that every time you see a bus, it has this little black ARM button on it. And when it's all black with the gray letters, it means it's not been assigned to one of the two usable auxes, right? So these are the accelerated real-time monitor auxes, aux1, aux2. Ironically, these are the actual auxes that you're used to using in console. And what I've seen people online wondering is how do I route from Luna to those auxes in console? And the idea here is that Luna takes care of all that for you. All you have to do is declare one of them as one of your two usable auxes for live pass. So let's just say here I have a session with a bunch of stuff going on, and I want to arm this vocal track. You'll notice that as soon as I do that, these sends all go gray, or all go dim, because the sends that they're sending to the buses rather that they're sending to have not been declared as ARM auxes. So for example, if I were to declare this capital chambers, now when I arm this track, the capital chambers one does not go gray because this guy's now all a part of that. So Luna is seamlessly, without you having to do anything, is building you a low latency path that's allowing you to hear both your live input straight to the cues, which I have up here, right, as well as being able to send that verb to the cues. And of course, both of these channels are going to the monitor outs, right? So, and if I wanted to do, if I declared this one as an aux, then you'll notice this one comes to life. So you have two of these live ARM auxes to choose from and to use for all of your live paths. Of course, if you don't, these guys over here, this guitar reverb and this chorus, these are part of what we call playback tracks, and these don't need to be in a low latency environment. The processes are still in the DSP, but they don't need to be fed to cues and to the mon outs. And you can freely change these if I decide that I want this one instead. It'll take it over, and you can see that it handles all of that switching for you. So that's just something I've been seeing a lot online and wanted to just say something about. I don't know if Connor wants to interject, or Ben, if you have any additions or anybody want to add to this.
Well, I did see some people asking questions about how AU plugins come into working in this ARM-based workflow like this.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so let me add that into the equation. So you'll notice that when I arm this track, right, all of these plugins are DSP based, and they're able to handle this, right? So let's just say if I were to switch and put one of these guys to be an AU plugin, and Ben will do the little trick we learned last time to create this custom icon, right? Remember that?
Yeah.
So now here I have a track that as soon as I arm it, you'll notice that the AU plugin bypasses, right? So it automatically bypasses because it can't be part of that low latency path. It's because it's running on the CPU and not running on our DSP chips. So it's really a seamless workflow that Luna allows you to continue to do that stuff, and then handles the bypassing for you automatically.
Nice. Well, and something else I'll just point out here, I'm sure everyone else is noticing this, as you're arming this track, now that you've switched your two ARM enabled auxes over here, you notice how that tube tech is going red. So again, Luna is really, really smart. So it's figuring out in the background, it's kind of rearranging where these plugins are based on the DSPs to give you the low latency experience. And what it's finding is that in order to have the AMS RMX, which is a very heavy plugin, Capital Chambers, which is a very heavy plugin, those two combined with the channel strip that you have on that vocal channel, it's like, oh, actually the CL1B, I don't have enough room for that DSP wise, so it's automatically bypassing that in addition to the Fab filter, which is the AU plugin. So again, this is kind of all the Luna's helping you guys be successful, and the number one goal at all times with inside Luna for when you're trying to record something, all we care about is giving you a low latency experience. And if that means that, hey, all right, you're not going to get, you're not going to get that final channel or that CL1B on that channel, it's because you've maxed out the amount of DSP jumps that you can make. So yeah, it's important to kind of see what's happening in here and just know that, it can still be a bit of a balancing act depending on how much DSP you have available, and especially with some of these heavyweight plugins.
Yeah,
but Luna's taking care of you.
Yeah, and the core workflow here is that, and you're going to see on tonight on Fab's presentation that this is a dense, thick mix, lots of processing, lots of Luna extensions running, DSP plugins, AU plugins, and it's just seamless. I don't have to think about it. It's just all taken care of for me. There's no all in this one single window environment.
Hell yeah, awesome. That's great. Thanks for showing that, Drew.
Yeah.
So Matt, were you able to find something where we can show people how to comp?
Yeah, I think I got a basic example here. Just give me 1 second to tidy up.
Tidy oop.
Alrighty.
Cool. I just saw a question asking about ARM bus for monitoring drums through a bus. So ARM, you can send into an ARM bus, but you can't group together tracks through an ARM bus. Is that correct?
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So basically what you're gonna do is, like, if you're tracking drums and you want to process it, you're gonna do the processing on individual channels there. But in terms of being able to smash those together and smash it through a compressor, you'd actually have to do that in a send scenario. So you take your raw drum tracks, use one of those ARM sends, throw a distressor or a 175 or 176 on it, and then that will still happen in low latency, and you can get that really pumpy, awesome compressed drum sound happening live, just like you would in hardware.
Yeah, and I guess correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, but I think you can have it set up, but just when the tracks are armed, they go straight directly to the cues and directly to the mons. And then as soon as they're unarmed, then they'll resume their paths that you did. So it's actually, again, it's super smart. It does the switching for you. It's DSP when it needs it, and then it will, as soon as you unarm it, it goes back to doing its normal thing.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yep.
Nice.
Cool. Yeah, I'm already here, so I'll switch over. Cool. So this will just be a pretty basic example, but should give you the basics of it. So say I got a couple different versions of my lead vocal that I recorded to the same track, just as versions.
Mm-hmm.
If I wanted to kind of piece those together, my particular way that I like to do this would be create a second track that will be the comp track. So basically, I'm going to take the parts of each take that I like from the track I recorded to, pull them into the comp track so I can make them one track.
Nice.
So for example, on this first take that I did, this second phrase here got a little blown out, a little distorted. But the second one, the level's a lot more manageable. So I'm going to take the first phrase from this first recording, and if I hold down Option while I select the track, I can basically duplicate it down to the track below.
Nice.
So it's still in the first track. I can reference it later, but now it's in my comp track. So then I can switch over to my second take, and I can find this little part here that I want to use. Quick way to kind of snip that out of the longer clip, we just hit the B key. That automatically separates it. Now it's its own clip that I can do with what I want.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I'm just going to hold down the Option key, drag it straight down. Boom. Cool. So now I've got just a real basic comp on this blue track down here. If I wanted to make these all one clip, I can use Option Shift 3 to consolidate. Bam, I have a comp track rather, all as one clip in the timeline here.
Nice.
That's a pretty basic example of it, but you can see how that could be useful if you have 4 or 5 different takes and pulling them all down in the same comp track.
Nice. Well, and there's coming from the Pro Tools world, here, let me take over. I'll show you Matt, I'm going to show you how to do that twice as fast.
Right on. Show me the better way.
Here we go. Let me share my screen. So this is going to be a very faked example because I don't actually have multiple takes in here yet. But imagine that this bass, I had 2 takes of it, and one of them, I'll move one a little bit out of the way so you can see what is coming from what. So comping to different tracks, that's how a lot of professional engineers and producers prefer to do it. So you're preserving one track with just your takes, and then you have a second track with your comps. So, at any point in time, you can always go back and get what your raw performances are, and you have just a single comp track that's very clear and easy to see. So that's actually a really good practice for doing it. But the way I'll show you guys here right now is this is if you wanted to do it all inside of one track. So you already have a lot of settings, or you just really want to preserve this all in one place. I'm going to do this entirely with keyboard shortcuts because that's the kind of boy I am. So I'm going to do Control / to create a new version. And if I really want to get fancy, I can double click on that version name and call it comp. And then now what I can do is over here in the version menu is I can switch between my different takes, and you can get down, note by note. You can pick which one you want. So say I want to take the first 2 notes from version 1. I can just simply hit C, select my comp track, V, and then I can go second take. I can take these 2 notes from from my second playlist here, C and V.
And Ben, shift up and down will cycle you through those versions.
Oh yeah, thank you.
That's the one, because it's so fast.
Yep. So let's do this now. So I'm going to copy this phrase, comp this one. So I'm going to hit C, shift up. Now I'm on my comp version, V, boom, there we are. And then I can also, I know there's ways, I can tab. You can get, if you want to do this, I think there is a way to do this without even touching the mouse. I'm going to try it. So we can go, I'm going to do shift, tab. And now I've been selecting that by doing tab to transient, C, shift up, V for comp. And then I can tab to the end of that. So now my playhead's there. Go back to V1, tab to this note, shift tab to select, C, shift up, comp, boom. So the more that you do this is kind of going to become a muscle memory thing of creating new playlists, creating duplicate playlists, shifting between playlists, copying, pasting. And similar to what Matt was showing you guys too, is that, you can option drag, but you can also just go C and then hit I believe it's semicolon. P. Yeah, semicolon or P allows you to take that selection and go up and down a track. So I can go C and then semicolon, V, and now I've pasted some of my bass down onto my guitar track. So for those of you who are very keyboard oriented, this is a really great workflow for being able to quickly comp together tracks. And then this is my favorite thing to do inside Luna whenever doing examples like this. Is like, cool. And if all that sounds terrible and you don't want to keep any of it, Command Z, Command Z, Command Z, Command Z, Command Z, Command Z, 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 Z. I'm stepping back. I want
say Z that rapidly. It sounds like easy.
Z, 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 Z.
Easy.
And there, I just completely undid everything. All the progress I just made on this comp, I just completely blasted it away. But that's kind of a cool thing that is feels very unique to Luna. Is that every setting, every change that you're making inside of a session, you can just as easily do as you can undo them as well.
Yeah, that's awesome, Ben. And just in case it wasn't obvious from your example, it looks like doing it that way, it always gets pasted exactly where it was on the original record track, which is awesome. You never have to worry about if your grid value is set too high and you nudge it over by a 16th note or something.
Well, even in your method, Matt, if you would make your selection C and then colon, semicolon, and then V, you would have made sure that the selection stays tight. So yeah,
exactly. Yeah, that's a great tip, man.
Nice. Well, I saw one of our Dan, who's helping us on the chat, posted up a question here of, so when he's hitting record in Luna, it's muting the track in console, and sometimes he doesn't prefer that. Is there a way to disable that option?
Yeah, I'll take that one.
Oh, you take it, Matt? Okay.
Yeah, there is a way to do that. So that's called the isolate feature in console. Console tracking mode in Luna. Isolate is something a little bit different, which I can cover here too.
Nice. We're getting into some cool advanced features here, so I hope everybody that's here watching is down for some full nerd session, because we're getting into some cool topics here.
Yep. Yeah. So console tracking mode, basically this is put in place so that people that have already owned an Apollo before Luna came out and are familiar with the console workflow, where anything you plug in the Apollo, it's a live input, you can hear it through your monitor outputs right away. That's basically what console tracking mode gives you while still having all the features of Luna. So with console tracking mode off, as soon as you open a Luna session, as soon as you open Luna at all your input channels get muted. And the only way that these get unmuted normally would be if you record arm a track in Luna that has the corresponding input set. So if I set up a track in Luna with analog 5 as the input, or line 5, it would, and record arm that track, it would become unmuted. But in some cases, I mean, you might want to be setting up sounds, just have everything plugged in, be able to hear everything without having to worry about your record ready state or your input monitor state in Luna. That's where console tracking mode comes in.
So it basically takes you back to if you're used to the console plus a DAW kind of workflow, if that's, if you already like and want to have that same sort of workflow inside there, that's basically the option you use to get to that.
Yeah, and that
Exactly.
allows you can be communicating with the talent while you're changing sessions, while sessions are loading. You could still be working the talk back and here and chit chatting with them, and you're not subject to that input monitoring, requirement or having a session open. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally.
But to add on top of that though too is when you do bring those channels up inside of Luna, it brings in all of their settings from console. Is that correct? So like you could basically set up 8 channels of drum tracking, unison, set all that stuff inside a console. If you're in console tracking mode, then when you set up those tracks inside of Luna, record arm those, it's still going to be monitoring through console, but it does preserve all of the inserts and unison settings, correct?
Yeah, that's right. It only changes the mute state, but it still copies the plugin chains back and forth from Luna to console, depending on if you're tracking or mixing, just like it would normally. So yeah, it's great.
That's awesome, killer. And yeah, let's go ahead and show people this new isolate function, because this is, as far as I remember, this is brand new for 9.11.1, correct?
Right. This
Yeah.
is a new feature of console for this version that came out with Luna yesterday.
Nice.
And one we can't really show, one that's not easy to demo via stream, but is the mono compensation is also another long requested feature that is in 9.11.1.
That's right. Yeah, major enhancement there with mono summing. When you mono on the monitor section, the level is correctly compensated. It's wonderful.
Nice. Well, and this isolate function is something we're, for making these live streams for you guys, we're relying very heavy on being able to have
very much
isolate.
so.
Yeah, and just to explain a little bit, when you open console after you install 9.11.1, you'll notice a new button over in the modifier section over here called isolate. Just to use the example of this live stream here, I have my mic that I'm talking to you through plugged into input 1. I have an SSLE channel loaded up here. I want to use the same settings regardless of what's going on in Luna, of course. So I have this channel isolated, which you do just by clicking the isolate button and then clicking the power button for the channels you want to isolate. And you'll see this little isolate label down below the channel name.
Mm-hmm.
And what this does is no matter what I do in Luna, if I open a new session, if I recall an old session, this SSLE channel and whatever else I had loaded here is going to stay exactly the same. So that input's always going to sound exactly the same. It's not going to get blown away by Luna opening a new session or doing something else.
And this is a great feature that even if you're not using Luna, you can take advantage of this to recall setups that while protecting, you cut drums and you want to protect your drum tracks while recalling a session, for overdubbing, it's gonna work for even, people not using Luna. So it's a cool thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, especially if you've got a kind of a preset, say you've got a lot of synths or drum machine, if you've got things kind of hardwired all the time and you always want, the unison, you always want like a 1073 loaded up there, and no matter what you're doing, you just want to have that be your starting point for each one of those tracks. Isolate helps you keep that intact from session to session.
Yeah, Connor, what do you got? You guys call that persistent inputs, right? Isn't that what you techie guys call it?
Yeah, persistent monitoring, right? Like where you want something to always be available so that you're not, ever losing the signal processing on that. So you can in fact set up a channel in console that is always receiving the input from some piece of gear or some device, some particular instrument configuration. So like for me in my studio, I've got an aux set up, and that's always isolated so that no matter what I do changing the console session, that my aux is always unmuted and ready to go. And I can just play my guitar at any time. Others will do similar things with different devices, but the point is so that you can always count on hearing that device no matter what you do with your console session or with Luna.
Cool.
Nice. Cool. So I saw another, had a good suggestion in here asking about bounce in place, freezing tracks, stuff like that. So bounce in place and freeze, we don't have those available in V1. But it's similar, kind of a workaround or a way to get that sort of functionality happening. The way that bouncing works inside of Luna, and this is something we haven't gotten to touch on at all yet. We've been focusing so much on like getting up and started inside of Luna. What's finishing like in Luna? So I can show you guys just quickly what the bouncing protocols look like. So let's say I wanted to. Let me just pull this up, move that out of the way. So when I hit Option Command B, it brings up the mix down settings. And of course, this is also available up here in the file menu, export, mix down. So by default, it's going to listen to my main fader. So this is the full mix. And then it gives you a bunch of other options. But the thing I really love that we added in here is if you click on that sources for main, that's going to be your default one. But what you can also do is you can also come in and select all of your tracks, or you can also select individual tracks. This allows you to quickly bounce out stems and take it into, send it to a collaborator, or take it into another DAW for more production.
And Ben, you don't have any buses in that session, but really you can do the main, the individuals, and the stems all in one shot. Just set it all up, hit the button with or without processing, and there you go. Make a bus and you can see that.
Yep. Good call, Drew. So if I make I just made 2 buses here real quick for my drums and my guitar, and I call that guitar 3 for some reason. Now you'll see over here, I have main, now I have my 2 buses, and then I have the individual tracks. So this is in the context of like a freeze or a bounce in place type of workflow. What you would do is you would select all your tracks, say done. So now it's saying multiple sources selected. Now you actually got a couple of very helpful and useful options here, especially if you're going to be taking this over into another workstation. One of these is include a MIDI file for tempo map and instruments. So what this will do is it'll export my MIDI tracks and my session tempo as a MIDI file that you could then import. It allows you to bypass effects. So if you want to print just the raw audio that's on the track with no added effects, you would click on that. And same if you wanted to be able to preserve mono tracks.
Thank God for that one. That's a great one.
Right? Any of us that have received stems out of Logic, you
read my mind.
Yeah, exactly. When you get those stereo stems for a mono source, you're like, could this just be yep, exactly. We allow you to preserve that. And this last one here is real-time mixdown. So by default, Luna will export at as fast as it possibly can. But if you do want to sit there and listen to your track one more time, which I often, I'm always split. I typically appreciate it, but I'd say like 6 times out of 10, I end up noticing something in the bridge that I want to fix, and I immediately cancel my bounce and fix it, and then rebounce it again. So it's a good like last little sanity check. So then you can tell it where you want to save your files. So it'll default kind of save to wherever you last were putting out your bounces. So I've been putting all mine into just one Universal Audio folder. And then you get audio file settings. So you can select wave, AIFF, or AAC. You can select the sample rate, and you can select the bit depth, and then hit mix down. And I'll show you what that looks like. Since I didn't do it in real time, it's now going to go as fast as it possibly can, and it's sending all tracks. So we could sit here and just enjoy a little bit of coffee, watch a progress bar go by.
Coffee break's great. I think that's the perfect use for it. It's like when you used to have to rerun the tape machine or something. Mm-hmm. But actually, the fact that you can do all those multi-sources in a bounce, what I love about this, and I'm sure Connor can add to this, but it kind of promotes if you have a bucket sum kind of workflow where you have your drums to a drum group and vocals to vocal buses, and actually keep things separated. It's a great way of hitting the Neve summing as well, because that's more like being on a real console where you're actually going to hit the routing modules and then they get cascaded into a final program group output on the Neve desk, which is exactly what you can do inside Luna. The benefit of like mixing like it's on that desk is that when you actually come to bounce out at the end, you can take individual tracks, your stems for label delivery if you need to do stems for remix, and also then a mix down, of the final print. So the fact that you could do it all and then go for a coffee, I think that's cool.
Right?
Yeah, it's so rad.
Due to the early release, we couldn't finish the bounce elevator music though. But
V1.1, you'll have that actually. No one else.
You could make a bounce back rub. That would be pretty cool, Connor, to be fair.
Maybe have it make some machine noises, so you can really feel like the reels are spinning.
Oh yeah, that'd be cool. Hey, when we make edits and stuff, can we get the sound of like actually razor blades through a splice block? That would be pretty cool.
It'd be like one of those cute features that you're like, you love it for about 5 minutes, and then 10 minutes into it, you're like, all right, how do I turn this crap off?
Yeah. It was due about 7 days ago on April Fool's, right?
Nice. Oh, seeing a bunch of questions kind of come in here about MIDI, and even I was talking to Eric earlier. He was wondering about how to set up MIDI inputs. One of you guys have a session open that we could help demonstrate setting up MIDI? Just getting MIDI input and some of the things that people need to think about or look out for getting their MIDI setups going.
Yeah, I can show the one I had earlier. I just need to get the keyboard plugged in again on it.
Cool. So while he was doing that, as you saw, my render finished. There we go. Luna. We now have all my stems sitting right here, all perfectly bounced. I gotta say, I really do like how Luna labels things as well. You know, session name and then the track, and then let's do just as a test. I'm just gonna create a blank session here, and this is a really great. You know, we were kind of talking about this yesterday, so you can drag and drop audio straight onto the timeline, and as you notice, it kind of follows where your mouse is. But a cool trick I learned is put these over in the track menu, and it will instantly bring them in and line them up all on the left-hand side. Just like that. And of course, you could also, you know, for sake of demonstration here, I bounced out and then brought it back into a new session. For the person who was asking about bounce in place or freezing, you would do a similar sort of thing, except instead of bringing it into a new session, you could also just import these right back into the session from which they were bounced. And that is the best way to be able to do bounce in place and or sharing sessions among friends.
And then you can just hide, deactivate stuff on the original track and hide that and keep it in there if you need to mess with it later, right? You can, it's super easy to get back to where you were and make a tweak if you have to, just like you would if it were a freeze,
Exactly. Yeah, and I can show you what Drew's talking about there. So let's say I've got two virtual instruments in there. I've got that lead synth and that piano melody. So I can load back up that main session here and then just drag and drop these in there. Of course, it's going to be subject to where I had my timeline selection. And hopefully, I hope I don't completely beach ball here. I moved too fast. This is where you need the elevator music.
Also, I love the fact that it's auto-naming everything.
Mm-hmm. Might have frozen up my Luna here, guys.
It happens.
It's all good as long as my mic still works. I'll let that think in the background for however long it needs. But Tom, let's talk about some MIDI kind of setup stuff, because in theory it's actually very simple. But if you've got a more complex MIDI setup, there's some cool things that you can do to get very specific. About where your inputs and outputs are going.
Yeah, cool. I'll share my desktop just for a sec so we can have a look at a couple of other things. Namely, one of them being this, only because it's come up briefly in the chat on YouTube right now. That if you go to show MIDI Studio and Audio MIDI Setup on your Mac, that's actually the first thing I'd always check if you're connecting like a MIDI keyboard, which has USB MIDI, like core MIDI, or maybe you have a MIDI interface, like I've got a Motu behind me, but there's also this really old one that I managed to get running here,
nice.
Showing up as the key station, and then there's some control surface stuff that's lurking. It's always worth making sure that whatever you've got connected, if it's a controller keyboard, that it's actually reported in here first and as valid MIDI ports. Otherwise, that might be one of your problems, that it's not seen by the Mac, let alone Luna.
Yeah.
Right. But then once we're into Luna, we've got instrument tracks here, for example. So underneath where you can load your instruments, so as I had it earlier, we had shape set up. You've got your MIDI input there, and as soon as you click on this to assign, you've got that nice pulsing orange box. Then it shows you all of the available MIDI ports, and that is actually, it should show you everything that you can see in that audio MIDI page.
Nice.
So down there, I've got the key station, which is what I'm using right now to play that, and in there you've got your, as usual, 16 MIDI channels within that particular port. So you may end up, if you've got lots of USB controllers and synths that have USB connection, you may end up with like 4 or 5 devices here with individual channels for each part.
Yeah, I've got a pretty I've got a bunch of MIDI instruments kind of sitting over here, so my MIDI list over here gets very long in the tooth. But it is really nice to be able to specify and say like, great, I just want to use my main controller, but you can also do, and I'll as soon as I've got my rig back up, and maybe this weekend we'll do a bit of a deeper dive into some of these like complex hybrid setups for MIDI. But you can be specific. You can say, great, I want to listen to my MIDI in, make that my main controller, but then you can also use this to send MIDI out to analog synthesizers. So I could say MIDI out to my Sub 37 and then create a audio track inside of Luna to then be monitoring that. But there's also some really cool stuff that you can get into by basically setting up that sub 37 as an instrument inside of Luna. So it's just a little foreshadowing. I don't have time to really get into that one today, but I think this weekend would be really fun to show people how to do some of these really cool advanced MIDI things.
Yeah, especially with the amount of people performing. I mean, we sort of take it for granted, but I remember starting doing MIDI, whatever it was, 25, however many years ago, and having to have an analog mixer so your synths and sound modules could just be monitored, because if you tried to route them back in, you would just be in latency world. And the beauty of the Apollo is it is a digital mixer. So that has just replaced all of the need for all of that stuff by using ARM and having processing on those inputs. You basically have exactly what you need to monitor all the various bits of hardware that you've got, which is super rad. Yeah.
100%.
So obviously you can add like MIDI effects in here. We've got MIDI output routing as well. So if you've got MIDI tracks, you're able to take those to your output ports and drive, sound modules and instruments that you do have there. And as Connor's been mentioning all along, this focus browser over here on the side is great, because if I wanted to just go key station, I can type key, and then I'm already searching through all the various MIDI ports. So if you've got, like you've got, Ben, probably, I don't know, 8 MIDI connections with 16 channels each or something, the ability to filter down is awesome.
Yeah, and it combines different, whether they're coming in over USB or they're coming in through a MIDI interface. Like, it kind of all gets put together and it's all accessible in one spot, which is great.
On this topic as well, because obviously a lot of us guys have got synthesizers, some of them with CV control. Although we don't have CV generation within Luna, I've seen this as a question that cropped up on the chat earlier. There are some people that make audio units plugins that can do CV generation, and as far as I'm aware, all of these Apollo series are DC coupled converters, so you're able to use those to generate DC. I've not tested it, but I'm hoping we can. I guess you can try this, or you've tried it. With your grin on your face, I'm figuring you've probably done it.
I tried it once, and then there's for my workflow, there's a couple of better ways to get CV from a computer out into like a Eurorack module. Having something that's dedicated to that. You can see I've got a baby mini rack back there, but Lev, who's been on a bunch of these streams with us, he's got a massive Eurorack set up and a very complex assortment of ways to get in and out of it. But he's kind of doing a similar thing of using the Expert Sleepers modules, because those are great bi-directional DC coupled. And then you can also use Apollo outputs because they're DC coupled. You don't get the full 10 volts of range. You don't get 0 to 10 volts. But I believe it's 0 to 5 volts coming out of those. So it's another super, very advanced kind of setup workflow, but it is cool that it is possible. And actually, I see a chat thing came in here. People are kind of curious about automation inside of Luna.
Okay.
Tom, while you've got the screen up here, do you mind kind of giving the quick rundown of how automation works?
Yeah, so in your sort of timeline track header here, next to the record, enable, input, monitor, solo, mute, and track naming, you've got your view for the track here, which default is to clips. We've had a lot of questions about warping, but I know we'll get to this. But that's where, if you're watching and you've not seen this yet, if you select warps, that's where you can actually get to your sort of time adjustment for audio. And then below that, you've actually got all of the parameters available on that track to automate. So in this case, effectively seen as the output portion of the mixer, you've got volume, mute, and panning for that fader. So that's there. And then if you hold down control, you can just draw, your automation as freely as you wish. So, that's a pretty cool way of just pumping in automation data. There's some really nice stuff, actually. If I just zoom in on the track here, the ability to just grab a section and then hover over it. Yeah, sorry, trackpad fail, but just do this, and then you're trimming syllables and whatever else is great. And obviously, you're able to still tab to transient through the audio. So if you wanted to do that, just to pick at the start of a word and then grab it.
That's
one of the things
fun.
one of the things I love about that is that when you make a selection, your cursor changes to the trim tool at the line, right? It's like it totally makes sense that in other workstations, it's like you're at some other part of the track. Yeah, exactly.
Well,
yeah, that's super cool.
And you can also I learned this, so you can double click anywhere on the line and it'll add a point. So you can draw points and you can raise those and move them around. I believe, are they snapping following your grid?
They will, yeah.
Yeah.
I have such a habit now that I push command all the time that I forget that I'm even on the grid. But yeah, you can see that snapping in the 8th notes I'm on, I think. But if you hold down command, then you're into sample level, quickly put another point in there and move syllables and do what you need to do.
And then
And
if
you can do the usual stuff.
I was going to say, you can copy paste automation. I believe you can trim up and down automation as well.
Yeah, that's actually super cool too, because if say you've got a section of a song like a chorus and you just want that section of the chorus up, if you do that,
you select them, and then I believe it's exactly.
What's great is that it already makes points for you at either end nice and cleanly, and it does a thing. But if you don't select a portion and you can just do the whole track.
Oh, that's super
right there.
slick.
So like vocal up, vocal down.
Well, and Tom, you don't even have to go all the way out to the right. Like you can do it anywhere in the track. Like that's
true.
Thing.
If there's well, if you're over a selected segment,
go to the left a little bit. You can actually trim the whole track from the left of all of that.
Yeah, it'll go back to the previous point that's available to it.
Yeah, but I always found if you get outside of a region, because the automation's tied to the clip effectively, if you get outside of the clip, then you can pick up the whole track.
Yeah. So this is for people who are Picassos and like to draw, but there's for people who are kind of a little bit more touchy feely, you can also there's automation modes for touch, latch, and trim. So you want to walk them through how those modes work?
Yeah, so let's say this is my fader here, and this is the beautiful thing about having the focus strip is that you can see the automation going in and have access to the fader like right next to it all in one window, which is super cool. So if we put it in touch mode, then this audio is obviously not coming to you, but
yeah,
there you go. So you can see that works. So in touch mode, the ability to as you grab that fader, remove it, write the automation, and then the minute you let go of it, then you've stopped writing automation, and it's just popped back to the value it was going to be on before you put it in there is what you want, just to prove the point there. Let's touch it up and do a little bit here and then let go of it. And it sort of matches itself back in. Yeah. And then with latch mode, this is kind of useful if you're just doing section rides where you just want to set a balance for a verse, go into a chorus and whatnot. You could go, actually, I want it to be here, I think, in this verse, and let go. And then it will stay there and wipe all the sort of shuffling you did when you were figuring out where you wanted to be. And then come into the chorus, maybe I want to be here.
Yep.
So the cool thing is you could just use Latch to punch in, automation for sections.
That's really cool. And this stuff, as I remember, the automation respects the selection grouping, correct? So like if you had multiple tracks, say like select all of your drums, you can do these sorts of rides in real time, and they'll both kind of follow along.
So we could just stick. Well, they're instrument tracks. Obviously, we can still automate the audio, faders for them.
Nice.
So that's dead easy. And then as you saw kind of on this track here, I put it into trim mode and we get the magical colored fader. And what's so great about this is, say you're doing vocals. So we'll go into touch for a second. Maybe you're doing syllable rides. So I'm going to do touch, not with trim. And we'll just, often I'll catch the end of a word or the start of a T or something,
Tom's headphones must be cranked.
Yeah.
Wow.
That playback is, I'm not loud on, I don't know why that's so loud. That you're hearing that through my headphones though, right? Spilling onto the mic.
Yeah, right.
I'll do a dynamic mic.
I'm managing it right now. I'm not sure why, because obviously we're not.
Yeah, we don't.
Should just be the Q output, but still.
Yeah. But now, so now that you've written automation like that, you can go in and show people how the trim works.
So just because if it's loud to you guys, then let's try and make it less loud.
Oh, that's fine.
It's not loud. We just hear the bleed from your headphones.
We're just teasing you.
It's loud. Yeah. It's loud for me though.
I was gonna say I felt sorry for your ears.
Yeah, we could tell you started talking louder.
I thought I did, but that's probably a good thing because I'm mumbly. So anyways, so like let's say we've done all these like micro rides. I like to think of them as syllables and things like that. So I often get, performance in a vocal by just flicking the last syllable of a word to make it feel like they meant the word a bit more and all that sort of stuff. Or sometimes you've got the start of a P, T, or an F where they're a bit plosive, and I'm not a fan of like trying to use a tool to deplosive when you can just fade it or ride it. It's just part of the performance then. But yeah, so once you've done all those little micro rides, you want to keep them, but you just want to, at the end of the mix, just go vocal up, vocal down. Obviously, if I just stick everything on read, so you hold down option, you can put everything into read, for all tracks. Then obviously I'm going to try and grab that fader. I'm going to be fighting it, aren't I, to do a vocal up by a dB or something, or a guitar solo up.
Yeah, it's going to go back to, as soon as you let go of the fader, it's going to go back to reading the automation.
So what's great about trim, and this is a huge feature for pro mixing, is that it just nulls the fader to 0. The layer of automation behind it's still there. You can see it in the timeline view, but I can just say, yeah, no, I want that up a couple of dB, and
there he goes. So it's still, even though you don't see the fader moving anymore, all this automation is happening, but now he's just added a couple of dB to that automation, which is, once you've kind of committed to automation, kind of getting your fader rides in, if you need to make this, last minute adjustment or do the vocal up, vocal down mixes, that's where trim mode really comes in handy.
Yeah, because you could come back to all of this and just say, oh, I want it up a bit for the vocal up and vocal down, but having to print both versions and remember to do that, you'd be much better off coming here and put it in trim mode and do, right, I'm going to do a vocal up a dB and a vocal down a dB and print both, or print all three.
And it's awesome because when you switch back to the mixer view, it becomes very obvious which channel you were trimming on, because you'll have one yellow fader that's like, oh, that's the one that's in trim mode.
Yeah, and what's great as well is if say you do a lot of those rides as almost performance rides, so that they're even in drums, I'll often do it with overheads to make that cymbal crashes stand out and tom fills stand out, and then I'll kind of bury them for a bit. I certainly like getting to the chorus, often lift the overhead mics a couple of dB and stuff. All those things are like cool, but then eventually you just kind of want to be able to turn all your drums up and down at the end once you've got further into the final balance of the track. I think the ability to do it for everything and just put everything into trim, and then have your mix nulled off to 0, and there's no more worrying about this kind of like all those moving faders going on and all that distraction and stuff. It's just, right, do I like this? Do I need more or less of XYZ? It's such a great workflow. I'm stoked that we put that in Luna on V1.
Hey Tom, can you I noticed a question from the chat, and this is something I've seen online that maybe you could show us. This is a little, it's actually a cool thing, but a little quirk in Luna, that you can't add a unison plugin until the track is armed, and some people that's throwing some people. Could you maybe give us a little demonstration of that? Show us.
Sure. So on this guitar track here, you can see that's the full mixer strip for it. If you think of it like, until that track is armed for record, it doesn't need to pull in any audio from the physical input of the Apollo. Thus, it doesn't need to actually use the DSP either to load a unison plugin and transform that input stage into a preamp or a guitar amp or what have you. But as soon as you decide, yes, I do want to record guitar, it's going to, in this case, remember what I had loaded up on that guitar channel when we did this earlier on today with the TS overdrive pedal, and the guitar amp. But for example, if we'll create
that's all hidden from
track.
you. Yeah, until you arm it, that's all hidden from you. And in fact, it's not using any DSP, so it's actually kind of it's a cool thing. It's a feature, but it's interesting. It's something that I noticed in the chat. So that thanks for showing us.
I think unless you kind of understand that bit of it, you look at it and go, well, I want to sort of set some gain on that channel, and obviously the gain's locked out. You can't see phantom power or anything, but when you tell it you have a physical input, and I'm going to use this input because it's in ARM. We've now made that whole mixer strip in Luna a DSP strip with near zero latency. It's like it is in console. It's running through the Apollo, so it's not going to the Mac CPU for buffering or all that sort of stuff. It's happening all here. So these are actually hardware controls. So this is a cool feature. You've got complete recall of the gain of your preamp, the fact that you've got polarity inversion and filtering on here, or in the case of right now, I'm on an instrument input, but if I just unplug this for a sec, you'll see it switch off the high Z. We're now on mic in, and we can enable phantom power. So one other cool feature here is that if you load a session and it recalls this, as soon as you have something that was with phantom power enabled, Luna can actually warn you that you've got phantom power connected. So maybe you've switched out and no longer have that mic connected, or you've got something at the other end that doesn't need phantom power. It's just really neat the way it's all integrated into your session, and the way it can do that is by storing it along with the ARM state. If you're not in record enabled, then it doesn't configure the Apollo.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is,
awesome.
and it's super
Thank you.
cool, because it's saving DSP as well as giving you and this, I think, a really good example for anyone that's looking at what we're doing right now and getting really curious. This is actually a session that Tom did this morning in our first office hour of the day, which I believe If you go onto YouTube, you'll be able to find it. That was Office Hour. What was that, number
2, 3,
3?
4, 5.
4?
5.
It
Didn't
was
we?
4, I
5?
think.
Oh, 4.
This
Yeah, we
morning?
did 3
We
yesterday.
all said different numbers.
It's like a game of cards or something. Was it Snap? I think it's
We're
4.
all running. We're all
Yeah, it was
running
number
on
4.
fumes at this
Yeah.
point.
So
4.
this morning's was number 4. That was weird. Why did we do number 4 when we only did 2 yesterday? I can't count. Either way, there was a session from this morning, and hopefully you guys are appreciating. We're not taking these down right away. We are leaving them up so people can kind of go back and check it out. But Tom did an amazing demo this morning showing us shape and Moog bass and Ravel, and then to cap it all off, he played guitar for us and kind of showed how the arm combines, both for instruments and audio tracks, and how that all works together. It was a cool track. Like, it had me bobbing my head hard this morning.
Thanks, man. Yeah, and you just woke up as well, so that's a good sign.
Exactly, just the right amount of coffee. But cool. So yeah, that's kind of a quick tour of how automation works, and to me, it's very intuitive how most of the automation settings work. And hopefully you guys are all able to try some of this stuff out yourselves. As you can see, Tom is going through and doing the big undo, which Luna allows you to do. I wanted to do one last thing before we sign off for this office hour. And in our previous office hour, we were talking about keyboard shortcuts. And guys, I don't know, this is a major oversight. We forgot the most important keyboard shortcut of Luna, which is the record shortcut.
Oh yeah, that's a great one.
So spacebar is play, stop, obviously, but recording is command spacebar. But if we're all using Macintoshes here, command spacebar by default will actually pull up Spotlight. So let me show you guys real quick how to turn off the Spotlight shortcut, so that way the Luna shortcut will work as expected. So as you saw, I went into my system preferences, keyboard, and then you come down here to Spotlight. All you gotta do is uncheck show Spotlight search with command space. Easy as that. So which you can change if you really love Spotlight. I don't. If you do love Spotlight and you want to keep it, I would recommend switching that up to something like Control Option Command Space. So that's 1, 2, 3. You can basically do it all with one hand. So 1, 2, 3 space. That's a good one that typically doesn't get in the way of any shortcuts in Luna or Pro Tools or other DAWs.
Hey Ben, on a similar note, I had one of our Facebook mods, J-Rock, messaged me today about in mission control, one of the possible defaults there is is control up arrow was one of those. Like I think it's that one, maybe that
control up arrow and
control
down.
up arrow. Yeah, you're gonna want to undo those. If you're gonna be doing the track sizing. So
Yep. So
shout out to J-Rock.
Thanks, J-Rock. And then the last one I'll show you guys here that is Lev showed us. I think it was like right after we finished the stream, we were talking about customizing keyboard shortcuts. And Lev reminded us Apple Mac OS at OS level has the ability to add keyboard shortcuts to any application. So you can come down here to App Shortcuts, hit the plus button. You can select Luna. And then whatever the menu title is, you basically go into Luna and my Luna's frozen at the moment, but you would go in here, type the exact menu title, exactly how it's written. So say something like MIDI merge, I think is one of the options that doesn't by default have a keyboard shortcut to it. You could type MIDI merge and then keyboard shortcut, give it your own user assigned keyboard shortcut. And again, this is a little tip for me. I've back when I was using Pro Tools all the time, I had a bunch of these set up because Pro Tools also famously doesn't let you customize your keyboard shortcuts. I would come in here and all my custom keyboard shortcuts for anything I do, I always do that 1, 2, 3 and then the letter. So for this, I would do Control Option Command M, and now I've got it. Oops, Control Option Command, not spacebar. Control Option Command M, and then add. So now I've got a MIDI merge keyboard shortcut that I've customized for Luna. Now these won't show up right away. You're gonna have to quit Luna and then get back into it in order for that to show up. But this is kind of a cool trick that is applicable not just to Luna but to any program in Mac OS.
Yeah, that's a great tip, Ben. And just back to the how to start record. Command space bar works too, but if you have a keyboard with a number keypad, you can also use the 3 key.
Yeah.
Good call. Nice. Well, great guys. Well, this is man, it's already 3 o'clock. These hours just they honestly fly by.
Flying by.
They do.
They literally every time we're doing this, I'm always surprised at how quickly we reach to an hour. So this is I hope you guys are watching here at home. It looks like I can see the chat is just going nuts the whole time. So I'm glad everybody's out there getting engaged. Hopefully you guys are finding some success inside of Luna, having some fun with it. If you're still having issues, keep on hitting us up in the live chat. There's if you're running into like real actual issues, there's the docs, docs.uaudio.com, where you'll find the user manual and the knowledge base for Luna. And if you're having a real serious problem, then you can always get in touch with support. I believe they're pretty slammed, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they might not get back to you right away, but we do go through and clear every ticket that gets come in. I believe gets a response, right, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. And shout out to the support department. They're working really hard right now
Yeah.
because there's a lot of people contacting them. So
Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, if you guys are having issues, just please be patient. Again, I would love to get to absolutely every single question that we're seeing in the live chat on these broadcasts, but we're trying to pick and choose and keep it informative and get entertaining for you guys as well. And speaking of keeping things informative and entertaining, this isn't the last office hours of the day. We're going to be back in just under an hour and a half. We got Fab DuPont is remoting in from his studio in New York City, and he's prepared a whole mix inside of Luna, which he's going to show us how he did that. But then after he's got the whole mix, he's going to show one of the really unique things about Luna, which is the fact that you can go back in and record drums or record guitar or do any sort of overdub activity. You can do that with no latency or almost no latency. So he'll be able to play it in, still preserve the feeling, preserve the mix, and kind of just inject something new into there at the same time. So that's coming up in an hour and a half. But also we've put together our schedule for tomorrow, which it was just going to be a lot of us. It was going to be a lot of us guys. But then we had a couple of our friends here at UA, Vance Powell and Dave Cobb. They are coming in, and we're going to do a whole session dedicated to Neve summing. I know there's been a lot of requests in the chat to talk and kind of explore the Neve summing that's built into Luna. It's a premium Luna extension, so it's woven into the fabric of Luna. But just like our other Neve plugins, it's not included just for free. However, there is a 14-day free trial, so any of you can try that out and really hear what the Neve summing sounds like. But if you want to, not just hear it from me, but hear it from some experts, Dave and Vance will be in tomorrow, and we've got a session from the band Rival Sons, where they came back and remixed it inside of Luna to help us show off the possibilities of Neve summing. So tomorrow's schedule, that session, the one with Dave and Vance will be at 1 p.m. PST. So mark your calendars, 1 p.m. tomorrow. We'll be here talking about Neve summing. But before then, we're going to be back again with Tom in the morning. What time? So it's 8 a.m. my time. What time is that for you, Tom? Don't get it wrong.
4 p.m. Is that right?
I think so. Yeah. So we'll be at 4 p.m. London time.
5 p.m. for Europe. 5 p.m. for continental Europe, right, Tom?
Yeah,
That's right.
There we go. Okay, so now everyone knows what time we're starting tomorrow. So we'll be here for that session. Then we'll follow that back up with another session at 11 a.m. PST, where we'll focus again on just Q&A, answering your guys' questions, making sure we're addressing everything in the chat. 1 p.m. Pacific with Vance and Dave Cobb, looking at the Rival Sun session. And then we're going to cap off the day at 4 p.m. PST. Dave LeBolt, who you guys might remember from our Tech Talk video about the Luna instruments, is going to be joining us live. And we're going to really dive a little bit deeper into some of the sound design possibilities inside of Shape, and with the Mini Moog and Ravel. And as you guys have no doubt heard, that guy is a monster player and knows these instruments inside and out. So not only will we kind of be treated to a nice little musical feast, but also learn a little bit more about what's going on inside those plugins. So great. So that's all the announcements. Guys, thank you so much for joining us again. We really appreciate having you guys here, and it's seeing the chat and seeing all the viewers kind of tuning in on this. That's makes us really happy to see you guys enjoying Luna and getting up and running with it. So yeah, we'll be back here in not too long from now. All right. See you guys then.
see you guys.
See ya.
See ya.